Welcome to Debt Matters. Today we're looking at the latest figures from the Insolvency Service, specifically for registered company insolvencies in October 2025 across England and Wales.
And we're not just here to, read out the numbers. The real goal is to give you an operational blueprint. It's about taking these stats and turning them into real actionable changes for your credit control teams.
Right, so it's not just the total number of failures that matter.
No, not at all. It's about understanding the flavor of failure, the mix of types. That's what tells you how fast you need to act, how you manage your risk, and, well, ultimately how high your recovery rates are going to be.
Okay, let's unpack that operational blueprint then. We've seen this consistent pressure on businesses all year, and October seems to continue that trend. What's the headline number?
The total for England and Wales came in at 2,029.
2029, and how does that compare to, say, the month before?
It's a 2% rise on September 2025, which had 1,995, so, steady pressure.
But what about the bigger picture, year on year?
Well, that's where you see the real shift. That 2029 is 17% higher than the 1,739 we saw back in October 2024.
17%. Okay, that's not just statistical noise. That feels like the environment is genuinely getting tougher.
It is. For anyone in collections, that means a bigger workload and, of course, rising bad debt risk.
So the overall number is up, but you said the mix is essential. How did those 2029 cases break down?
Okay, so the raw data shows Creditors Voluntary Liquidations, or CVLs, are still the main component. We had 1,582 of those.
Right.
Then there were 301 compulsory liquidations. After that, 119 administrations, just 17 company voluntary arrangements, and 0 receiverships.
So CVLs are still making up the bulk of it, around 78% of the total.
They are. It's still the main way companies are closing down. But if you're managing risk, the real story is in the areas that are changing most dramatically.
Let's get to those pressure points then, because that's what should be shaping collection strategy right now. Where should we start?
I think we have to start with the compulsory liquidations. That's the most dramatic change.
Okay, so there were 301 of those. How does that compare?
Well, it's up 8% on September.
Yeah.
But the really telling figure is the year-on-year one. It's up a remarkable 62% compared to October 2024.
62%. That's a huge jump.
It's a massive red flag for any collections team. It means court action is just becoming a much more common tool for creditors.
So is this all new financial distress, or is some of this the court system just, clearing a backlog of older cases?
It's got to be a combination of both.
Yeah.
There's definitely new distress, but also, yes, a clearing of historic petitions.
Yeah.
But for you, on the ground, the practical effect is the same. You're seeing more what we call end-stage borrower behavior.
End-stage behavior. What does that look like specifically? What should a team be trained to spot?
Think about the patterns. A sudden, really urgent payment proposal that's just completely unworkable.
Right.
Or a customer who's been quiet suddenly burying you in paperwork requests, asking for documents from years ago.
Just trying to slow the process down?
Exactly. They're throwing sand in the gears to buy a few extra days or weeks before the court finally steps in. These aren't businesses trying to recover. They're just attempting a desperate tactical retreat.
And that kind of urgency from them demands an urgent response from your team.
It absolutely does. The operational message here is, well, it's non-negotiable. You have to tighten your escalation timelines dramatically.
So if an account starts showing those behaviors, you have to assume the worst.
You have to assume a formal proceeding is days away, not months. And that means your process for grabbing all the evidence, the contract, delivery notes, emails, it has to be fast and it has to be repeatable. There's just no time for guesswork.
Okay, let's switch over to the volume leader then, the CVLs. They're still 78% of all the failures in October and up 11% on last year.
Right, and while that jump is less dramatic than the compulsory one, this is where most of your monetary risk is probably sitting.
And what's the connection there for early intervention?
Well, unlike a compulsory liquidation, a CVL is a decision made by the company's directors. And once they pass that resolution, the recovery window just slams shut. Your success then really depends on whether you saw the distress signals months ago.
And had time to reduce your exposure.
Exactly. Reduce exposure and, crucially, make sure your documentation is perfect.
You mentioned having perfect documentation ready, particularly to defend against something called a preference dispute. Could you explain what that is?
Sure. That's a vital term to know. Put simply, a liquidator's job is to make sure all creditors are treated equally. A preference is when a company, just before it goes insolvent, chooses to pay one specific creditor over all the others.
Maybe a supplier they have a good relationship with?
Could be. And if that happens, the liquidator will come to you and demand that money back.
So even if you've been paid, you might have to return it. That's concerning.
Absolutely. The money gets clawed back into the pot for everyone. Your only real defense is to prove that you received that payment in the ordinary course of business.
How do you prove that?
With immaculate documentation, you need to show a history of consistent, standard collections activity, no special treatment. That's your best shield against those claims.
Okay, that brings us to the third shift, administrations. We saw 119 of those. That's 19% higher than last October, even with a small dip from September.
Yes. And when a company goes into administration, it triggers a completely different workflow for your team.
It's an operational pivot.
A total pivot. Your normal collections activity, the calls, the reminders, it all has to stop immediately. Continuing to chase can actually damage your position. The focus has to shift entirely to a strict procedural playbook to engage with the administrator.
So what are those first mandatory steps when that notice of administration lands?
First, identify the administrator immediately. Second, pause all other activity. That means shutting down any automated dunning systems. Third, prepare and submit your claim correctly and on time. There's no grace period. And finally, and this is probably the most critical part, you must preserve the entire contractual history. We call it the contract to cash trail.
And that contract to cash trail is much more than just the invoice itself, isn't it?
Oh, much more. We're talking everything. Signed terms, POs, any contract variations, delivery and acceptance notes, every invoice, and a clean timeline of all communication, especially any dispute history. That full story is what an administrator needs to validate your claim.
This all leads directly to what a manager can do this week. Given that 62% surge in compulsory liquidations, what's the single most important action?
It has to be dedicated ledger triage, but focused on behavior.
Okay.
Look at your aged debt right now and find the accounts showing those classic red flags. Broken promises, consistent part payments that never seem to clear the balance, or, a sudden weak dispute that's just come out of nowhere.
Those are the ones most at risk.
Those are the companies most vulnerable to that compulsory liquidation spike. Put your resources there first.
And once you've identified them, what's the next tactical step before you get to legal action?
You should be pulling together what I call an insolvency pack for your biggest accounts, your highest exposures.
Do it now, not when the notice arrives.
Don't wait. This pack needs all those documents we just talked about. Signed terms, POs, proof of delivery, a timeline of communication. Having it ready saves you weeks of panic when a deadline hits.
I like that idea of an insolvency pack. It shifts the whole mindset from being reactive to being proactive.
Precisely. And you're not just saving yourself time, you're signaling to the administrator or liquidator that you're professional and organized. A clean, well-presented claim often gets looked at more quickly.
Given the rise in these last-minute tactics, it seems like relying on a weekly meeting to make decisions is just too slow now.
Far too slow. Speed is everything. You need to set clear, automated internal triggers for action.
Like what?
Define exactly when an account gets escalated, when it must be put on hold, when you proactively reduce a credit limit. If you wait for a meeting to get a consensus, you've already lost.
And then when a company does go under, having a standard process is key.
Yes. Standardize your proof of debt workflow. The goal is to minimize simple errors that can get your claim delayed or even thrown out. Treat it like a compliance audit, not a negotiation. Process and paperwork beat persuasion every time.
Okay, before we finish up, let's put this into a wider context. What's the overall risk of failure for the average company right now?
Well, if we look at the full 12 months up to the end of October 2025, the rate was about 1 in 187 companies on the register entering an insolvency.
1 in 187.
Which works out to about 53.4 failures per 10,000 companies. And it is worth noting that this 12-month rate is actually a little bit lower than the rate from the previous 12-month period.
So even though the monthly numbers are climbing, the annual risk has maybe stabilized a bit?
It's just that, yes.
Now, there was a specific caution from the Insolvency Service about the compulsory liquidation figures, wasn't there?
They did note that. The figures for England and Wales might be revised in the next release. It's because of a case management system change they brought in around November 1st.
So anyone monitoring winding up petitions as a leading indicator needs to be aware of that.
Exactly. You might see some retroactive adjustments in the official stats next month as they phase out the old system.
Okay, finally, let's just touch on the devolved nations. We focus a lot on England and Wales, but Scotland and Northern Ireland can be very different.
They can be radically different. In Scotland, the total was 115 insolvencies in October, which, funnily enough, is the exact same number as October 2024.
And the mix.
Their mix was quite balanced: 61 CVLs, 50 compulsory liquidations, and 4 administrations. Almost a 50-50 split between voluntary and forced closures.
And what about Northern Ireland? I saw that had a big percentage increase.
It did. Northern Ireland saw 48 insolvencies, which is a 55% increase over last October. But the really critical thing here is the composition.
How so?
It's heavily weighted towards compulsory liquidations. 35 of the 48 cases were compulsory, with only 12 CVLs and 1 CVA.
That's a huge difference. So in England and Wales, 78% are voluntary, but in Northern Ireland, compulsory liquidations are dominant.
It means the behavior of creditors, the role of the courts. It's just a completely different environment. For a credit team, you can't apply the same risk rules to Belfast that you do to Birmingham. Your strategy has to reflect that likelihood of swift, forced court action there.
So to wrap up the main lesson here from these October figures, while CVLs are still the biggest category, it's that 62% surge in compulsory liquidations that's the real operational challenge. It's forcing collections teams to prepare for more of those last-minute disputes, and it's shortening the time they have to act.
Preparation has to beat persuasion. And that leads to one final thought for you to consider. Given this extreme difference in the insolvency mix between England and Wales and Northern Ireland.
Right. CVLs dominating one, compulsory is the other.
The question to ask yourself is, what assumptions are you making about director intent and court activity based just on the national headlines? And, more importantly, should you be adjusting your regional credit strategies to reflect those very distinct geographical patterns? It's worth taking a close look at your regional risk weighting this week.